Hello everyone. If you love heartwarming animal stories and want to follow the inspiring journey of these adorable friends, don't forget to hit the subscribe button now so you won't miss any of our videos. Now, let's dive into today's emotional story. Ethan sat quietly in his new room, staring out the window at the unfamiliar town below. The gentle breeze rustled the trees outside, but it did little to ease the heaviness in his heart. At 12 years old, Ethan had lived in more places than he could count, and each move left him feeling more isolated than before. He longed for the stability and friendship that seemed to elude him with every new town and new school. His parents tried their best to make things feel normal, but they didn't understand what it felt like to be the new kid, the kid no one spoke to, the one left out at lunch, the one standing alone at recess. After moving again, this time to the quiet town of Birchwood, Ethan had promised himself he wouldn't get too attached. He wouldn't bother trying to make friends because, like every other time, he would just end up leaving them behind. It felt easier that way. But despite his attempts to guard his heart, loneliness crept in, wrapping itself tightly around his chest. He wasn't sure what was worse. The feeling of being invisible in school or the emptiness of returning to an empty house after every day. His parents worked long hours, and Ethan was left alone to wander the house, finding solace only in books and video games. He couldn't even talk to his parents about how he felt, as they seemed so consumed with their own lives. One afternoon, as he walked home from school, his mind heavy with thoughts of how he could ever fit into this new town, Ethan heard a faint whimper from an alleyway. Curious, he approached cautiously. There, lying on the cold concrete, was a small dog, its fur matted and dirty, and its body trembling from pain. Its eyes, though fearful, looked up at him with desperation, as if asking for help. Ethan's heart ached at the sight. He couldn't just leave the dog there. He didn't have the strength to ignore something so helpless. Without thinking, he knelt down, gently reaching out to the dog. "Hey there," he whispered softly, careful not to startle it. The dog flinched but didn't move away. It was obvious the animal was in pain, but it seemed to trust him. Ethan carefully scooped the dog into his arms, feeling its frail body shaking. The journey home was slow, with the dog resting its head against his chest. For the first time in weeks, Ethan didn't feel quite so alone. He wasn't sure what to do next, but one thing was clear: he wasn't going to leave this dog behind. When he got home, Ethan rushed to the kitchen to clean up the dog's injuries, wrapping it in a towel to keep it warm. His parents were still at work, and he had time to figure out what to do. He carefully cleaned the cuts and bruises on the dog's legs, trying his best to be gentle. It was clear the dog had been through a lot. Ethan knew he couldn't just leave it at the shelter. He needed to help. That night, as Ethan lay in bed, the dog curled up beside him on the floor, he made a decision. He would take care of this dog. He would name it Scout because, like him, the dog was a wanderer, trying to find its place in the world. Little did he know, Scout would soon become more than just a companion. Scout would become the bridge that helped Ethan find his place in Birchwood. Days passed, and Ethan's routine slowly began to change. Scout's presence brought a sense of purpose to Ethan's otherwise solitary life. The dog was always by his side, following him around the house, sitting with him while he did his homework, and comforting him when he felt the familiar pang of loneliness. With Scout, Ethan no longer felt quite so invisible. The bond between them deepened each day as they navigated their new life together. Ethan's parents were surprised when they came home one evening to find Scout in the living room, wagging his tail as Ethan sat beside him, smiling. "Where did this dog come from?" his mom asked, kneeling to pet Scout. I found him on my way home from school, Ethan explained. He was hurt, and I couldn't just leave him. His parents exchanged glances but didn't say anything more. They could see the change in Ethan, the spark in his eyes, the way he cared for Scout, and the newfound responsibility that seemed to lighten the burden of his loneliness. As the days passed, Ethan's connection with Scout grew stronger. He made it a point to walk the dog every day, something that gave him a reason to go outside and interact with others. At first, he kept to himself, walking quickly, avoiding eye contact with the kids playing in the park. But Scout had a way of drawing attention. The dog's exuberance and playful nature caught the eye of others, and soon enough, Ethan found himself striking up conversations with the neighborhood kids. One afternoon, as he and Scout walked through the park, a group of kids approached. "Hey, what's his name?" one of the boys asked, pointing at Scout. "His name's Scout," Ethan replied, feeling a bit awkward. But to his surprise, the boy smiled and knelt down to pet the dog. "Can we play with him?" another girl asked. Ethan nodded, and the kids began to throw a ball for Scout, who eagerly chased after it, his tail wagging wildly. For the first time since moving to Birchwood, Ethan felt like he belonged. Scout's playful antics had opened the door for Ethan to connect with others, and the boy who had once felt invisible now found himself in the middle of a group, laughing and sharing moments with the kids around him. Scout's energy and joy were infectious, and his presence had a way of breaking through the walls Ethan had built around himself. As the weeks went by, Ethan continued to grow more confident. He was no longer the shy, withdrawn boy who kept to the shadows. With Scout by his side, he began to form real connections, starting with the kids in the neighborhood. They would play together every afternoon, and slowly, Ethan began to open up to them. He shared stories, laughed, and even helped some of the younger kids with their homework. It was as if Scout had shown him the way, not only to a group of friends but also to a new version of himself. One day, Ethan was walking Scout through the park when he saw a boy sitting alone on a bench. The boy looked sad, his shoulders hunched as if the weight of the world rested on them. Without thinking, Ethan approached him. "Hey," he said softly. "Are you okay?" The boy looked up, startled. Ethan smiled gently and added, "This is Scout. He's great for making people feel better." The boy looked at Scout and smiled weakly. "I'm Liam," he said, standing up. I don't know how to make friends here." Ethan nodded. "I get it. I felt the same way when I first moved here." He paused, looking down at Scout. "But Scout helped me. He made me see that it's okay to reach out. It's okay to be yourself." Liam seemed to consider this, and for the first time, he stood a little taller. "Maybe we could hang out sometime," he suggested. Ethan smiled. "I think that sounds great." As the two boys walked away, Scout trotting happily beside them, Ethan realized something important. Scout had done more than just help him. Scout had taught him how to help others, too. Through his dog, Ethan had not only found his place in Birchwood, but he had also become a friend, a companion, and a source of comfort to someone else. The bond between Ethan and Scout had come full circle. And in that moment, Ethan knew that the loneliness he had once felt was now a thing of the past. As autumn descended upon Birchwood, the vibrant colors of the trees mirrored the changes in Ethan's life. What once felt like a constant uphill struggle had now transformed into a journey of newfound hope, companionship, and understanding. With Scout by his side, Ethan felt like he was slowly but surely finding his place in a world that had once seemed so distant and unwelcoming. The puppy had become his anchor, the bridge to friendships, and the unwavering companion he had longed for. Every afternoon after school, Ethan and Scout would walk through the neighborhood, their footsteps growing lighter with each passing day. Ethan was no longer afraid of the stares or the awkward silences that had plagued him in his first days in Birchwood. Scout had opened doors, not just to friendships but to an entire new world that Ethan had never known existed. The kids in the neighborhood would wave to him, and soon enough, he found himself surrounded by a group of friends who wanted nothing more than to spend time with him and his lively dog. One day, as Ethan and Scout were playing fetch in the park, they saw Liam again, sitting on the same bench. This time, however, he wasn't alone. He had brought a small soccer ball, and he looked up as Ethan approached with Scout. "Hey, Ethan," Liam called out, his voice warm. "You and Scout want to join us for a game? We've got a team going." Ethan paused, his heart racing for a moment. Just weeks ago, he would have hesitated, overwhelmed by the idea of participating in something as social as a soccer game. But now, standing before Liam and his new friends, a feeling of confidence surged through him. He had Scout, and he wasn't alone anymore. "Sure," Ethan replied, a smile spreading across his face. "We'd love to." The kids split into two teams, with Ethan and Liam on one side. Scout trotted happily alongside them, his tail wagging excitedly as he watched the kids kick the ball around. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he was truly part of something. He wasn't just the quiet boy on the sidelines. He was an active participant in the fun, laughing and running alongside his new friends. As the game progressed, Scout darted in and out, happily chasing the ball whenever it was kicked his way. The other kids, who had once been hesitant around Scout, were now laughing with Ethan as they threw the ball to him, letting Scout join in on the fun. Ethan found himself in the midst of genuine laughter, the kind that came from being fully engaged with others, not just observing from the outside. That afternoon, as the sun began to set, Ethan sat on the grass with Scout lying beside him. Liam and the others had wandered off, but Ethan remained, feeling a sense of peace that he had never experienced before. For once, he didn't feel like the outsider. The dog beside him had helped him bridge the gap between his isolation and the world around him, and he realized just how powerful that connection was. Scout had become more than just a pet. He was a catalyst for change in Ethan's life. His presence had opened up a new chapter, one filled with friendship, laughter, and a sense of belonging. Ethan had found his place in Birchwood, not through grand gestures or overwhelming acts of bravery, but through the quiet loyalty of a dog who had shown him how to reach out to others. As the evening air turned cool, Ethan's parents called him inside for dinner. Scout followed him to the front door, wagging his tail eagerly. As Ethan opened the door, he glanced back at the yard, the park, and the neighborhood around him. Everything felt different. It wasn't just the people he had met or the friends he had made. It was the transformation within himself that mattered the most. He no longer saw the world as a place of isolation, but as a community that he was now a part of, all thanks to the love and companionship of a dog who had walked beside him every step of the way. "Dinner's ready," his mom called out from the kitchen, and Ethan smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that had once been missing. When he sat down at the table with his parents, they noticed a change in him. He spoke more than he ever had before, telling them about the game in the park and how Scout had made everything so much better. For the first time, Ethan felt comfortable sharing his day with his parents, his voice no longer hesitant but filled with excitement and joy. "Scout's the best," Ethan said with a grin. "He helped me make my first real friend." His parents exchanged a smile, proud of the progress their son had made. The transition to Birchwood had been tough, but they saw how Scout had played a crucial role in helping Ethan come out of his shell. The bond between them had deepened, and it wasn't just the dog who had changed. Ethan, too, had transformed into a more open, confident, and happy boy. As the evening wound down, Ethan leaned back in his chair, glancing at Scout, who had curled up next to him on the floor. He realized that it wasn't just the game in the park or the new friendships that made him happy, it was knowing that Scout was there, always by his side, ready to face whatever challenges the world threw at them together. Ethan had come to understand that the power of companionship wasn't just in the presence of others, it was in the quiet moments shared with those who understood us most. For Ethan, that was Scout, his loyal friend, his guide through the world of friendship, and the one who had helped him find the strength to live fully again. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan knew that he was never alone again. As the weeks passed, Ethan's transformation became even more apparent. His once lonely afternoons, filled with silence and uncertainty, were now filled with laughter and joy. Scout, always by his side, had become more than just a pet. He had become Ethan's best friend and the catalyst for the changes that had brought Ethan into a community of friendship and love. One chilly Saturday morning, as Ethan walked with Scout through the neighborhood, they passed a local park where a group of kids were playing basketball. Ethan had seen them many times before, but this time, something felt different. Scout noticed the group first, wagging his tail excitedly, pulling Ethan towards them. The basketball game was paused as the kids turned to watch them approach. "Hey, is that Scout?" a boy called out from across the court. Ethan's heart raced. The group of kids from the park had become familiar to him over the last few weeks, but this was the first time they had called out to him directly. He hadn't expected them to notice him or Scout so enthusiastically. The boy waved them over with a big grin. Ethan felt a momentary hesitation, but Scout's enthusiasm was contagious. "Yeah, it's him," Ethan called out, feeling the excitement in his voice. "He's become a real basketball fan." The kids laughed, and one of them invited Ethan and Scout to join the game. Ethan looked at Scout, whose tail was wagging furiously as he bounded forward to greet the kids. Scout had a way of making everyone feel comfortable, and in that moment, Ethan felt more confident than he ever had before. He walked over to the group, his steps feeling lighter, his chest fuller with excitement. It wasn't just about playing basketball, it was about being part of something, of truly belonging. The kids on the court welcomed Ethan warmly, showing him how to join in. Scout was quickly absorbed into the action as well, fetching stray balls and running after them as if he were part of the team. Ethan couldn't help but laugh at the sight of Scout, his small body darting across the court like a seasoned player. The laughter of the kids, the camaraderie, and Scout's playful antics felt like the world had finally opened up to Ethan. He was no longer the shy, withdrawn boy who had once hidden behind his dog. He was now Ethan, part of a group, laughing and playing, with Scout by his side. Throughout the game, Ethan could see how Scout was the glue that held them all together. When the game slowed down, Scout would nudge the ball towards the players with his nose, eager to keep the fun going. He wasn't just a bystander, he was an active participant, reminding everyone to stay joyful and engaged. It wasn't just about the sport, it was about the connection, the shared moments of happiness and play that made Ethan feel like he truly belonged. As the sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow over the park, the kids gathered around to take a break. Ethan sat down on the grass with Scout curled up beside him, his heart full. For the first time, he realized that he had finally found his place, not because of his achievements or successes, but because of the relationships he had built and the trust he had learned to place in others. One of the boys came up to Ethan, sitting next to him on the grass. "You're pretty good out there," he said, giving Ethan a friendly nudge. "We should play again sometime." Ethan smiled, feeling a warm glow spread through him. "Yeah," he replied, his voice confident and sure. "I'd like that." The boy smiled back and nodded before returning to the game. Ethan sat there for a moment, watching the group of kids run around, laughing with each other, and realized just how far he had come. The fear and uncertainty that had once controlled his every move had been replaced with a sense of belonging, thanks to Scout. It was Scout who had shown him how to open his heart and trust others. It was Scout who had given him the strength to step outside of his comfort zone and embrace the world around him. As Ethan left the park with Scout at his side, the sun now dipping below the horizon, he felt a sense of peace he had never known before. The world didn't seem so big and overwhelming anymore. He had found his place in it, and with Scout by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. The journey from isolation to connection had been a long one, but with Scout's unwavering loyalty and love, Ethan had found more than just a dog. He had found a companion, a guide, and a friend who had shown him the true power of companionship and the importance of overcoming fear and embracing new experiences. With Scout by his side, Ethan knew that anything was possible. He had the support of his loyal dog, and now he had the friendships and community that had once seemed out of reach. The future, once clouded with doubt, now shimmered with hope. And so, Ethan and Scout continued their journey together, side by side, ready to face whatever adventures life had in store for them. The bond between them was unbreakable, a reminder of the extraordinary power of love, loyalty, and the simple joy of friendship. The story of Ethan and Scout teaches us profound lessons about the healing power of companionship and the importance of extending kindness, both to ourselves and others. Ethan's journey highlights how loneliness and isolation can be overcome when we open our hearts to connection, whether it's with a person or an animal. Just as Scout helped Ethan navigate his new life and build friendships, we too can find strength and growth when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and reach out for support. The bond between Ethan and Scout is a reminder that love and loyalty have the power to heal emotional wounds, fostering trust and resilience. In real life, animals often play a similar role in helping individuals cope with loneliness, stress, and challenges, especially for children. They offer unconditional love, support, and companionship, teaching us that no one has to face life's obstacles alone. This story encourages us to recognize the value of relationships, both human and animal, and the positive impact they have on our emotional well-being and ability to thrive in difficult situations.